Communities Coalition, Justice Sandra Cautious, Dr. Edward Green, UNAIDS and PANCAP advisor, champions, participants, PANCAP partners, and stakeholders, members of civil society and the private sector, our partners in the media, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all. It is my pleasure to introduce the Master of Ceremonies for the PANCAP Champions for Change 4 opening ceremony. Ms. Margaret Lawrence is a veteran broadcaster with over 40 years of experience. She has worked in HIV/AIDS education since 1991. She is a recipient of the Golden Arrow of Achievement for Drama and Broadcasting. She was trained at the University of Guyana, Carimac, University of the West Indies, and the British Broadcasting Corporation. She's also the recipient of the Prime Minister's Medal for Public Management. She's the Executive Director of Murundoy Incorporated, a non-governmental organization specializing in behavior change communication. She's also the administrator of the National School of Theatre Arts and Drama. Ladies and gentlemen, our host for today's proceedings, Ms. Margaret Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Derek Springer, Director of the Pan-Caribbean Partnership Against HIV and AIDS, PANCAP. Thank you for your gracious welcome. All protocols established. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Welcome to this significant ceremony and workshop as we fast-track our goal of ending AIDS by 2030. A special warm Guyanese welcome to the participants from Barbados, Belize, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Suriname, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the Dominican Republic, and Washington, D.C. We have certainly had a traumatic week here in the Caribbean, haven't we? And also parts of the United States of America. Our solidarity and assistance will be with our brothers and sisters in this time of need. Just as Harvey and Irma have wreaked havoc in our lives, so has the HIV/AIDS epidemic. I dare say we all have been touched in one way or the other. And no one knows this better than our first speaker, who is the Executive Director of the St. Lucia AIDS Action Foundation, working with a wide range of stakeholders. She is the Director of the OECS Regional Coordinating Mechanism for the current OECS Global Fund grant. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the podium Ms. Joan Didier, the board member of the CBC Coalition.
Good morning. Protocol established, so I will just follow on. I bring greetings from CVC, the Caribbean Vulnerable Communities Coalition, but I also bring greetings from the OECS countries of Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Lucia. We applaud the progress that has been made by the partnership. We have been on board from the beginning. We have noted the struggles, and we are currently reaping the benefits. The fact that civil society is such an integral part of this highlights the point that we have made tremendous progress. I'm going to tell you a little story. It comes from the island of Antigua. It's centered around a man living with HIV, who lost his first wife from HIV, got married again, infected his second wife, who stayed with him, and she had a baby. When she went to the hospital for delivery, she suffered the worst discrimination you could think about. But he had affiliated himself to a support group of people living with and affected by HIV. And through that had empowered himself and recognized what is rightful. And that empowerment helped him to empower his partner. And so between the two of them, they were able to seek redress and have the situation diminished. This is what Champions for Change is. This is what Champions for Change does. And this is why we need to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Joan Didier, and thanks for that reminder of why we're all gathered here. One of the roundtable sessions later today is a discussion on interventions based on results of PANCAP engagements. Our next presenter is a firm believer in realistic outputs and can be described as a results-oriented person. She comes from a background of over 20 years' experience providing technical guidance for planning, implementing, and strengthening HIV public health programs. She served as a program development and public health specialist, HIV prevention, for the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC Guyana office. She is the current chair of the PANCAP Regional Coordinating Mechanism and chair of the Guyana Global Fund, the CCM. Formerly minister, responsible for culture, youth, and sport, she was on the 1st of this month elevated to the post of Minister of Education of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I think she deserves a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, please join in welcoming the Honorable Nicolette Henry, Minister of Education, Cooperative Republic of Guyana, to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for your kind words of introduction. First of all, I would like to recognize Her Excellency, Mrs. Sandra Granger, First Lady of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I would also like to recognize the Right Honorable Sir Dennis Bryan, President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Dr. Douglas Slater, Assistant General Human and Social Development, Chair for CARICOM Secretariat, Ms. Joan Didier, Board Member of the Caribbean Vulnerable Communities Coalition, Justice Sandra Kocius, Dr. Edward Green, and of course the Director of PANCAP, Derek Springer. I recognize other special invitees, Dr. Shannon Singh and Dr. Frank Anthony, and many other persons seated in the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me take this opportunity to thank PANCAP for inviting me to speak and congratulate them on the relaunching of Champions for Change. This initiative is paramount to achieving the United Nations goal of ending AIDS by the year 2030. Although the idea for the Champions for Change initiative was convened since 2004 in St. Kitts and Nevis, it has been in a state of dormancy since 2008, and so I congratulate Derek and his team on this initiative. This initiative, I believe, can leverage the substantial gains in the HIV response in this region, and we can continue progress, and it certainly would not be possible without the advocacy efforts of the people living with and affected by HIV. The rapid scaling up of access to HIV treatment, thus reducing deaths, and of course the increased life expectancy of the population, and the prospects of elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV. The journey towards an AIDS-free world would have to be driven by a multi-sectorial approach, which includes a coalition inclusive of government, private sector, developmental partners, civil society, and most importantly, renowned academics. This multi-stakeholders approach offers useful models for resuscitating the Champions Change Initiative. I believe that this is both a timely effort and also a reminder to recognize that the AIDS epidemic is not over. Like many other Caribbean countries, Guyana remains committed to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal by 2030, particularly Goal 3, which states ensuring healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. I want to say, according to data available here in the Caribbean, in 2015, there were 285,900 persons living with HIV. Of course, that is a decline from the 330,000 in 2010 and 450,000 in 2005. Additionally, statistics show that 87% of the persons living with HIV resides in Jamaica, Cuba, Haiti, and Dominican Republic. On the other hand, I want to say that in the Caribbean, we've gained recognition globally as the first region in the world to eliminate mother-to-child transmission of HIV. Even though Cuba is the first country in the world to do so, according to UNAIDS report in 2016, there has been an increase in new HIV infection in the Caribbean by 9% during the period 2010 to 2015. And there we saw Jamaica and Cuba contributing in large ways to this increased percentage. One of the main contributing factors to the rise in new HIV infection here in the Caribbean is the persistent stigma and discrimination, particularly to key populations such as commercial sex workers, men who have sex with men, lesbians, and transgenders. I believe with the resuscitation of the Champion for Change initiative, we will be building on the initiative to aggressively address the issue of stigma and discrimination. Stigma and discrimination can have, and we know it certainly has, a devastating effect on the lives of people living with HIV and on those closest to them. It also, in a large way, undermines our effort to tackle the epidemic. People are reluctant to test for HIV, to disclose their status, or to access treatment, care, and support. As the chair of the regional coordinating mechanism, and someone who has worked in the HIV field for the past 2 decades, I will continue my role to advocate for an enabling environment in which persons can access the total HIV package: prevention, treatment, care, and support services, irrespective of who they are. Ladies and gentlemen, the aim of this campaign aligns with my personal views that the rights of people living with HIV and AIDS should be protected and not violated. Stigma and discrimination is not helpful, nor is it acceptable. And so, as I leave the podium here this morning, I want to say, and I want to pledge, that I will continue to advocate for the strengthening of services and the removal of barriers that threatens the national and regional response to HIV. I thank you for the opportunity to bring these brief remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, and we do welcome your pledge and your support. I think it's a natural flow that following the Minister of Education, we have a youth for whom she is responsible. So it is my pleasure to welcome and to introduce a young man who I think I can proudly say is a role model and hopefully a peer educator. Mr. Brandon Donobrega attends the Diamond Secondary School. He loves computer games, football, and writes poetry. So here he is to do one of his compositions, I Dare You to Be Conscious.
Good morning, all. My poem is entitled, I Dare You to Be Conscious. HIV/AIDS. Are we aware? We should be. HIV is a human immunodeficiency virus transmitted mainly through blood, semen, or vaginal fluids. While the immune system gradually breaks down, the headaches, night sweats, diarrhea, and joint pains come around. One can shiver from being cold. It even makes the body feel feeble and old. AIDS is next, the second stage of the virus, often called the big truck. Worse than the first can be. When it hits you, the body system is merely defenseless, you see. Weight loss, boils, sores, even losing your hair. Then regret steps from unprotected sex, needle sharing or multiple partners affair. So let's be conscious and fight this scourge called HIV and AIDS. Today's fighter becomes tomorrow's champion for always. We have the power to make the right choices. Don't be influenced by fears or listen to the evil voices. And if someone has it, never discriminate or remind them of their mistake. Just offer support and encourage them to keep on living life. You don't want to depress them to pick up the knife. Tell them of available, effective antiretroviral treatment so they can live a normal, healthy life. Remember, you are the future, not history. Don't let your tombstone mark, die by HIV. Written by yours truly.
Excellent. Well done, Brandon. Just a reminder how far we have come. This morning I saw on the TV news a new discovery called PrEP. It's probably something that we should discuss in our workshop. You take PrEP every day and you become immune to HIV. Okay, well done. I dare you to be conscious. A charge that was given to our next speaker when he was honored by the CARICOM Secretariat as one of our first champions for change. Dr. Douglas Slater is the Assistant Secretary General of Human and Social Development, a position he assumed in 2013, on the 1st of October 2013. A national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and a medical doctor by profession. Dr. Slater has served as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade and Consumer Affairs, and Minister of Health and Environment. He was also chairman of the OECS Regional Coordinating Mechanism, negotiating the regional approach with the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. It's therefore my distinct honor to invite Dr. Douglas Slater to the podium. Dr. Slater.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to all. Her Excellency, Mrs. Sandra Granger, President, First Lady of the Republic of Guyana, Honorable Nicolette Henry, Minister of Education, Right Honorable Sir Dennis Byron, of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The other persons I want to address now and really acknowledge, I call them, I will say, soldiers in this fight against HIV. consists of Dr. Eddie Green, my dear friend Joan Didier, Dr. Frank Anthony, former minister, Director Derek Springer, and the team of PANCAP. And I see many other persons there, and I really acknowledge your presence and welcome you here. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be present on this occasion, and I am here representing the Secretary General of the CARICOM Secretariat, who has asked me to extend his congratulations to you for having this event, but also his regrets for being unable to attend due to many issues. Some of them I was mentioned at the beginning of this meeting. So I'm very honored to be representing him, and as you have heard, I feel involved since I've been there for some time in this fight. So on this occasion, the Pan-Caribbean Partnership Against HIV and AIDS is signaling to the region and the world its intention to accelerate the process towards ending the AIDS epidemic. This ceremony highlights 14 champions for change from various stakeholder groups across the region, which is consistent with one of the major aims outlined in the strategic direction of CARICOM to create a community for all. I therefore take this opportunity to congratulate the Executive Board, Director PANCAP, and others who have been involved. You have demonstrated a vision in pressing what we call the reset button for engaging the region through champions to advocate and be catalysts for achieving the goals of our international commitments to fast-track the end of AIDS in the Caribbean. Since its establishment at the intersessional meeting of heads of government and in Barbados in 2002, PANCAP has been a flagship that has demonstrated the true meaning of functional cooperation. In this regard, PANCAP's sustainability through these 15 years has been in no small measure due to the support of national governments, non-governmental organizations, the wide range of developing partners, civil society, and most important, people living with HIV. The political will of the region leaders and their commitment to the goals of PANCAP must be acknowledged. The Prime Ministers of St. Kitts and Nevis, who hold the portfolio for human resources in the quasi-cabinet of CARICOM, have human resources health and HIV, must be particularly commended for their roles that have led to the recognition and maintenance of PANCAP as an international best practice. What is of great significance may be overlooked in the fact that tomorrow, when this consultation wraps up, and no doubt arrives at vital conclusions, coincide exactly with the 10th anniversary of what is known as the Port of Spain Declaration, uniting to end the chronic non-communicable diseases. This is very important. This coincidence provides an opportunity for PANCAP and its champions for change to chart new directions consistent with the target of Goal 3 of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which states achieving the health and well-being for all at all ages. The elements of this goal, while aiming to end the epidemic of AIDS by 2030, places emphasis on the integrated health approach. It recognizes that while deaths from AIDS have declined by approximately 60% since the establishment of PANCAP in 2002, more people with the AIDS today are dying from up to opportunistic infections and other diseases such as TB, tuberculosis, Hep C, hepatitis C, and most of all, non-communicable diseases. It also recognizes that strengthening health systems, designing new integrated testing and treatment regimens, and adopting the WHO principles of universal health access are all important parts of the new paradigm for change on which the PANCAP champions must focus. In so doing, there are vital lessons to be learned from the successes and challenges involved in the AIDS response over these almost 2 decades of PANCAP's operation. The major successes are largely due to a coordinated strategic plan of action, a coordinated mechanism and provision for sustainable resource mobilization that eliminate duplication of efforts. In this respect, the Conference of Heads of Government in July 2012 pronounced on the need for fostering the complementarity between PANCAP and the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CAFA, and to work together in addressing HIV. This realization will no doubt be one of the considerations in the relaunch of the Champions for Change. The CARICOM Secretariat is at the crossroads of these changing dynamics, not only in health, but in reducing poverty, increasing access to education, promoting adherence to creating green economies and good governance. Also, having peace and security among other issues. Of particular relevance to this forum is our pledge to continue to provide an environment in which the PANCAP coordinating unit and the PANCAP champions of change can function effectively. For the CARICOM Secretariat, the 2000 or 2000 Master Declaration, which stated the health of the region is the wealth of the region, remains a relevant refrain today. It reminds us of the importance of investing in our human resources. That declaration placed emphasis on the 2 pillars, one, PANCAP, and the Caribbean Corporation in Health. I am therefore glad to see that the Caribbean Corporation in Health is fully acknowledged in the expected outcomes of this forum. Through this relaunch of Champions of Change, PANCAP has an opportunity to transfer the successful models of the AIDS response to public health generally, and the Champions for Change will also need to tackle those barriers and challenges to ending AIDS, and at the same time to take AIDS out of isolation. Yours will be the task to assist this region to fast-track the targets to get people tested, treated, and with undetected viral loads, to reduce violence against our women and girls, to advocate for affordable medicines, and for eliminating stigma and discrimination. Champions for Change must resolve to make CARICOM a community for all, a community that leaves no one behind. I therefore, on behalf of the Secretary General, again convey his best wishes and wish you a productive forum. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Slater. And I want you to join me in applauding PANCAP, 15 years of exemplary service to the Caribbean, and as Dr. Slater said, an example of international best practice. Please, a round of applause for PANCAP. And PANCAP has been able to function well with the assistance of several important partners, one of which is UNAIDS. So this moment, I'd like to recognize the presence of Ms. Dawn Futterham and Dr. Martin Ulit, representatives of UNAIDS. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the signal event in this morning's program, recognizing 16 outstanding persons who will assist us through their collective acumen to fast-track the HIV/AIDS agenda. It's now time to present to you our 16 champions for change. For outstanding leadership and championing of the Every Caribbean Woman, Every Caribbean Child initiative, and stellar work in improving the lives of children and women in Guyana, ladies and gentlemen, Sandra Marie Granger, First Lady of Guyana, and presenting our Minister of Education. Member of the Caribbean Community Forum of First Ladies and Spouses of Heads of Government, which focuses on reducing adolescent pregnancy, cervical cancer, mother-to-child transmission of HIV, and domestic violence in the Caribbean. First Lady Sandra Marie Granger. And now for leadership as Executive Director of Live Up, the Caribbean Media Alliance, and championing the HIV response in the Caribbean, Dr. Alison Leacock. 34 years experience in executive management. And I think I'd ask the Honorable Minister just to stay up here a while. I've got like 4 or 5 functions for you this morning. Thank you so much. For the past 10 years, Dr. Leacock has led a coalition of 112 media houses in 24 Caribbean countries. As part of the Live Up campaign, she has trained over 2,000 Caribbean broadcasters and is the current executive board chairman of the Global Media Initiative. Thank you. Dr. Alison Leacock. And now our third champion for change, for leadership in advancing the University Rights Advocacy Project and creating a safe space for LGBT students at the University of the West Indies. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Arif Bulkan. Attorney at law, formerly practiced law in Guyana. He was recently conferred with the prestigious Anthony M. Sabga Award for Public and Civic Contributions in 2017. Congratulations, Dr. Arif Bulkan. Our fourth champion for significant work and advocacy towards greater involvement of the faith community in national and regional HIV responses, Canon Garth Minot. He is the canon of the Cathedral in the Diocese of Jamaica and Cayman Islands, a member of the Religious Group Steering Committee of the Jamaica Council of Churches, and chair of the Board of Directors of the Jamaica AIDS Support for Life and Regional Faith-Based Organization Steering Committee. Congratulations, Canon Garth Minot. For outstanding work in public health and demonstrated understanding of the critical role that parliamentarians can play in ending AIDS, Dr. Frank Anthony. Dr. Frank Anthony, a member of Parliament and serves in the Parliamentary Management Committee and the Parliamentary Standing Committee. He has worked in the public health sector from 1993 to 2006, and we can go on. He has received a medical degree from the Russian People's Friendship University and a master's in public health from the Hebrew University in Israel. Congratulations, Dr. Frank Anthony. And now our sixth champion. For leadership of the CARICOM Youth Ambassadors Corps and Youth Advocacy, Dwayne Gutzma. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Law and Economics with direct responsibilities for business entrepreneurial empowerment and urban land lab for youth innovation projects. Thank you and congratulations, Wayne Gutzman. Moving on to our seventh champion. I take an extreme pleasure in saying this one. For advocacy work against sexual orientation and discrimination in Guyana and regionally, Joel Simpson.
I'm not sure.
But we are honored nonetheless. Thank you for accepting on his behalf. He's the managing director and the founder of the Society Against Sexual Orientation and Discrimination, SASOD, in Guyana. Thank you for accepting. So, we ask Dr. Slater to present the next award. Thank you. For advocacy and work in the LGBT community nationally, regionally, and globally, Kanita Placide. And accepted on her behalf will be Miss Maria Fontanelle. Kanita is a founding member and current executive director of the Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality. She helped to make history when United and Strong hosted an international dialogue on human rights in 2012 with ARC International, the first of its kind in the Caribbean. Thank you, and do convey our regards. And now for leadership in the HIV response and demonstrated understanding of the critical role that parliamentarians can play in ending AIDS. Laura Tucker Longsworth, MSN, RM, OBE. Laura is the Speaker of the National Assembly of Belize and Chairperson of the National AIDS Commission. She was honored with the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, OBE, for her contribution to nursing and community service. Thank you and congratulations. And I think our ministers have to be, she has cabinet meetings, so matters of state. And continuing along, our 10th champion is for advocacy on LGBTI issues, both nationally and regionally. Lucien Goubert, the chair of the Caribbean Forum for Liberation and Acceptance of Genders and Sexualities, CARIFLAX. He's a freelance consultant in health communication and youth development. Congratulations and thank you, Lucien. And number 11, for utilizing her platform as a sports personality for advocacy regionally and internationally, Nicolette Finance. She is a professional squash player who represents Guyana. She won the only gold medal for Guyana in the 2006 Central American and Caribbean Games in Colombia. She reached a career high world ranking of number 19, world number 19 in October 2013. She also appeared on the Whisper 2010 calendar. Congratulations and thank you for your advocacy. Nicolette Finance. And for significant work and advocacy towards greater involvement of the faith community in national and regional HIV responses, Dr. Nigel Taylor. And accepting on his behalf will be Mrs. Lerna McPherson, member of the Baha'i Faith Community. Dr. Nigel Taylor is minister in charge of the Calvary Evangelical Church. He holds doctoral degrees in the disciplines of theology and psychology. Thank you for accepting Mrs. Lerna McPherson on behalf of Dr. Nigel Taylor. Our 13th champion for contributions as an infectious disease and clinical care physician and contributions to the response to ending AIDS, Dr. Nakia Forbes. And accepting on her behalf the Dr. Shanti Singh Anthony, who is our knowledge coordinator at PANCAP PCU. Dr. Forbes is the director of the National HIV/AIDS and Infectious Disease Program at the Bahamas Ministry of Health. Thank you, Dr. Jen. For leadership as a member of Parliament advocating for the end of AIDS, the Honorable Terence Dayal Singh, Minister of Health, Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and accepting on his behalf will be Mr. Colin Curtin, Senior Accountant, PANCAP, PCU. The Honorable Terence Dayal Singh is the Minister of Health and Member of Parliament for St. Joseph in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you for accepting on his behalf. And now, the 15th champion this morning for advocacy and significant contributions to championing the HIV response in the Caribbean, Valderine Hackett. She is the Deputy Program Manager of the Communications Unit at the CARICOM Secretariat. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Management and Postgraduate Diploma in International Relations from the University of Guyana. More than 18 years experience in the field of information and communications. Congratulations and thank you, Valderine Hackett. And finally, for significant work and advocacy towards greater involvement of the faith community in national and regional HIV responses, Reverend Winston Mansing, who is the current pastor, senior pastor of the Puna Open Bible Miracle Center, a graduate of the Community Bible Institute in Brooklyn, president of the Faith-Based Network of Trinidad and Tobago, and an internationally certified educator on HIV/AIDS. Thank you very much, Reverend Mansing. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please stand as we salute all our champions for change. Thank you very much. On your shoulders lie enormous task. Please be seated. Thank you. And now I am honored to introduce this champion for justice. The Right Honorable Sir Charles Michael Dennis Byron is the President of the Caribbean Court of Justice and the President of the Commonwealth Judicial Education Institute. Born in St. Kitts Nevis, he read law at Cambridge University and was called to the Bar of England and Wales in 1965. Sir Dennis distinguished himself as a barrister at law and solicitor throughout the Leeward Islands. He has written many publications, has been a keynote speaker and guest lecturer at renowned events across several continents, including the prestigious annual Bruce Cohen International Law Lecture of the United Nations Association of London in 2011. Sir Dennis is an honorary fellow of the Fitzwilliam College of Cambridge University. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as we welcome the Right Honorable Sir Charles Michael Dennis Byron.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, the Excellency, and distinguished guests, I also adopt the protocol list. But I should start off by saying, as I am often tempted to, after such a wonderful introduction, that it might be prudent for me to simply say thank you and return to my seat while you still have the impression. But I am too grateful for the honor of addressing you today on the relaunch of the Champions for Change initiative to allow me to do that. And I'd like to congratulate the Pan-Caribbean Partnership Against HIV/AIDS for this very important initiative. Today's formal recommitment to collective and decisive action to end AIDS in our region by 2030 is timely and significant in fighting what the late Nelson Mandela classified as a war against humanity. It cannot be denied that HIV/AIDS is a chronic problem and a major health threat in the Caribbean. Our communities have been ravaged by its impacts and their future threatened. What is worse, the gains that had been made over the previous decade have to some extent unraveled. The UNAIDS Prevention Gap 2016 report reveals, in the Caribbean, and I'm quoting, in the Caribbean, new HIV infections among adults rose by 9% between 2010 and 2015, reversing gains made in the previous decade. In 2015, the annual number of new HIV infections in the Caribbean was estimated at 9,000. Despite its small population size, the Caribbean has the highest HIV prevalence globally after sub-Saharan Africa, unquote. And all of this is against the background that it is possible to end the epidemic. UNICEF noted, and I quote, "The face of HIV/AIDS has dramatically changed in the last 15 years. An HIV diagnosis is no longer a death sentence. Early detection, together with treatment and care, can ensure long, healthy lives and prevent transmission of the virus to others." Unquote. Several factors have contributed to the Caribbean's regression in addressing this epidemic. Apart from some communities having been left behind in one way or the other, the prevalence and pervasiveness of stigma and discrimination are among the foremost barriers to HIV prevention, treatment, care, and support. If we are to achieve the vision to end AIDS by 2030, we must attack the epidemic from every possible angle and using every available strategy and resource. What is therefore required is an all-encompassing strategy in which all social sectors, including the justice sector, is engaged. And this will be the focus of my address this morning, as I share with you on the topic of judicial attitudes and HIV, positioning the judiciary to effectively contribute to ending AIDS by 2030. I recall the words of the late Jonathan Mann, former director of the World Health Organization, Global Program on AIDS, who, in identifying the three phases of HIV epidemic, firstly, the epidemic of HIV, second, the epidemic of AIDS, and third, the epidemic of stigma, discrimination, and denial, and observed that the third phase is as central to the global AIDS challenge as the disease itself. He described this phase as an epidemic of social, cultural, and economic reaction to AIDS, which is also worldwide and which is intensified by fear and ignorance. The detrimental impact of stigma and discrimination was highlighted by the late Nelson Mandela, who stated, "Stigma discrimination and ostracism are the real killers. This was expanded upon in the 2010 PANCAP regional policy on HIV-related stigma and discrimination, which notes that HIV stigma and discrimination undermines prevention efforts and access to treatment, care, and support, as people are afraid to get tested and know their status for fear of disclosure and the consequences resulting from even the suspicion of an HIV positive status. A practical example of how this manifests itself was recounted in Sir Clare Roberts' contribution to one of the leading compendiums of HIV and human rights, when he stated that an HIV positive man in Jamaica reportedly indicated that, quote, with HIV, because it's seen as a gay thing, there's a lot of shame. If someone finds out they're positive, they are afraid that everyone will assume they're gay, so it is best to keep it to yourself, unquote. Now, today's relaunch is positioned within a convergence occurrence. It comes after the program's hiatus since 2008. It follows the groundbreaking vision for zero new infections, zero discrimination, zero age-related deaths, and the UNAIDS treatment targets that by 2020, 90% of all people living with HIV will know their status. 90% of all people diagnosed with HIV will have received sustained antiretroviral therapy. And 90% of all people receiving antiretroviral therapy will have viral suppression. It also comes on the heels of significant advancements within the region. The first is that there has been significant progress made towards achieving the 90-90-90 targets. The 2017 Global AIDS Update reports that in 2060, 64% of people living with HIV in the Caribbean knew their status. 81% of people living with HIV who knew their status were on treatment. And 67% of people on treatment were virally suppressed. 2016 also saw a continued increase in the number of persons accessing antiretroviral therapy and the concomitant reduction in age-related deaths to an estimated 9,400. In 2015, Cuba made regional and global history when it was validated by the World Health Organization as the first country in the world to have successfully eliminated mother-to-child transmission of HIV. Mention must also be made of PANCAP's Justice for All initiative, which focused on creating a facilitating environment to reduce HIV-related stigma and discrimination in the Caribbean, and led to the development of a comprehensive roadmap, which was a follow-up to the 2011 United Nations High-Level Political Declaration. There was also PANCAP's development of the regional policy on HIV-related stigma and discrimination in 2010, and the 2012 CARICOM Model Anti-Discrimination Bill, which proposes a comprehensive, harmonized legislative response to discrimination in various settings and on various bases, including a person's HIV status. And among our achievements, we should also include the great work done by many regional stalwarts. And I would mention specifically for this purpose Sir George Allen and Professor Rosemary Del Antoine for their scholarly and electoral contributions to the seminal compilation of HIV and human rights, legal and policy perspectives on HIV and human rights in the Caribbean, which gives a comprehensive and extensive view of the regional, legal, and policy-based response to AIDS. This work provides a context as well as a critical assessment of that response. There has also been action at the national level, targeted towards bringing countries into compliance with their international and regional obligations and commitments. In most cases, however, the legislative response to anti-discrimination has been confined to the workplace. For example, this year, Trinidad and Tobago launched its revised national work policy on HIV and AIDS. But despite these advancements, we remain crippled by fear, stigma, and discrimination. And this was recently stated by Cesar Nunez, Director of the UNAIDS Regional Support Team for Latin America and the Caribbean, during an address to the Caribbean Cytometry and Analytical Society just last month, where he noted that our reality is that the potential impact of game-changing scientific advances is being undermined by ignorance, fear, shame, prejudice, and exclusion. So, what do we do? The challenge was issued, I think, by Professor Clyde Landis, the chairman of the Sedimentary and Analytical Society. And he said, we have a choice. We either change our message, or we must accept the status quo, where fear and stigma rule our hearts and minds, preventing persons from wanting to know their status and blocking them from having the confidence to access available care. Now, HIV/AIDS affects every aspect of the human condition, and it requires an informed, rational, and just response. This premise is relevant to the judiciary. In the discharge of its duties as guardian of the due administration of justice and protector of human rights. The Honorable Justice Michael Kirby pointed out that the judiciary's response to HIV/AIDS extends beyond the strict rudimentary exercise of the judicial function, as the epidemic is fundamentally about human beings, fellow citizens. It is not about the law as such. Issues relating to HIV and AIDS, including those concerning HIV-related stigma and discrimination, have repeatedly engaged the courts. And the modes of engagement have been varied. They include challenges to decisions refusing employment to persons living with HIV/AIDS on the basis of their status, and even complaints about discriminatory treatment by, for example, officers of the court in the conduct of their duties. A recent example of the latter occurred in Jamaica in February of this year, where it was reported that a parish judge was given cause to inquire into complaints of discriminatory treatment made by a 22-year-old homosexual who was living with AIDS. The man who had been brought to court to answer drug-related charges, complained that police personnel had withheld his medication from him. And when he informed the officers that he needed to take the medication, he was told that they did not like homosexual. Now, according to the report, that man was infected with the HIV virus as a child after being assaulted. And this account highlights four things. First, HIV/AIDS is assumed to be synonymous with homosexuality. Second, homosexuals remain targets of stigma and discriminatory treatment. Third, stigma and discrimination can have an adverse impact on the health of persons living with HIV, even in cases where they are responsibly managing their illness by taking the necessary medication. And fourth, there is a responsibility on judicial officers to be vigilant as we go about our duties inside and outside the courtroom. Judicial officers must exhibit and reinforce anti-discriminatory attitudes and practices that will supplement and underscore the efforts being made to end the problem. Judicial officers must manage what goes on in the courtroom, ensure that people who are susceptible to discriminatory treatment are treated fairly by all players in the judicial process, including court staff, counsel, police officers, witnesses, and so on. And just in case the rationale for that is not obvious, let me recall the observation of Professor Matthew Biat that, and I quote, "Law is and must be seen as an important structural determinant of health." The significance of the role of law in response to HIV/AIDS should not be underestimated. I must reiterate that law ought not to be constrained just to legislation, international sources of law, or the common law, but by necessity, it must also extend to all the actors within the legal system. How should judicial officers proceed to position themselves to effectively participate in the response to HIV/AIDS? It is incumbent upon judicial officers to equip themselves with the requisite knowledge about HIV/AIDS. Now, not merely knowledge of the law relating to HIV/AIDS, human rights, anti-discriminatory laws, and the like, but also knowledge concerning the disease itself and issues which affect and promote the spread of the disease, such as, for example, gender inequality. Judicial officers must adopt a proactive stance to acquiring and updating this knowledge. We must obtain the relevant tools and materials. Now, this is not a novel concept. One only has to look at the 1992 HIV outline published by the Judicial Commission of New South Wales in Australia. But such an endeavor does not have to be carried out alone. For example, assistance is available. The 2010 HIV and AIDS reference materials for the judiciary in Zambia in East Africa was developed with the assistance of international donors. Likewise, UNAIDS has spearheaded the development of, important work, Judging the Epidemic, a judicial handbook on HIV, human rights, and the law. And the Caribbean is no exception. The Judicial Reform and Institutional Strengthening, the Jurist Project, which is being executed by the Caribbean Court of Justice, is in the process of implementing several projects which are key to supplementing the thrust towards ending AIDS by 2030. Although not specifically addressing the HIV/AIDS, the project's initiatives concerning gender inequality and the management of sexual offense cases offer significant infrastructural and capacity building support to the courts. As the president of the CCJ, it is my view that as an apex court, our reach should extend beyond the precincts of the court and our adjudicatory functions. As a criminal institution, we must engage in activities which improve access to and the quality of justice for all, and instill confidence in the fairness of the judicial system and the administration of justice. We contribute to this goal through our involvement with the Jurist Project. The Jurist Project has developed a robust gender program, which includes the drafting of gender equality protocols for judicial officers, gender sensitization training, and a gender equality accountability tool. The protocols are designed to assist magistrates and judges to adjudicate with a gender lens. Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, Belize, Trinidad and Tobago have been selected for implementation. The protocols for Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago have already been handed over to their respective Chief Justices. The gender sensitization training aspect of the program has been designed for judicial officers and court personnel to foster an enabling environment for the protocols to take root. The training modules place specific emphasis on addressing judicial bias, preconceptions, and the negative impact of stereotypes, addressing specific challenges deriving from multiple and intersectional discrimination, the role of international and regional human rights instruments, examining domestic legislation on gender-based violence, custody, maintenance, human trafficking, and the ways they can be applied to promote gender equality. The third leg of the program allows courts to monitor and assess their performance in the implementation of the protocols. Continued monitoring and performance assessment are crucial in instilling confidence in the systems being implemented. And I should mention that several rounds of gender sensitization training have already taken place at the CCJ. As for the management of sexual offences, Juris has developed model sexual offences guidelines, which embody internationally accepted best practices for the management of sexual offence cases and offer a rights-based approach to the treatment of complainants and vulnerable witnesses. The guidelines, which will be formally launched later this month at the Caribbean Association of Judicial Officers Conference in Curacao, will be distributed throughout the CARICOM judiciaries. This also carries a training component and will see the piloting of a model sexual offences court. There will be extensive political education drives which will focus on topics such as consent, given the disparity in our communities between what persons deem to be consent and what the law regards as such. Now, in dealing with attitudes towards knowledge and capacity building, the propositions made in PANCAP's Model Anti-Discrimination Bill for the establishment of a dedicated Anti-Discrimination Commission and Tribunal must be appreciated, because they indicate a positive attitude towards capacity building. And the establishment of a dedicated grievance resolution system means that complaints will not be hampered by existing case backlogs within the current judicial system across the region, which unfortunately still cause inordinate delays. The just management and adjudication of court cases which touch and concern issues related to HIV/AIDS must rest on a sound understanding of the subject matter and related issues, as well as on sound evidence. It also requires a pragmatic approach to the resolution of disputes before it. In doing so, prejudice is replaced by knowledge, and stereotyping by the judicial commitment to equal justice under the law. In order to ensure that the judicial process is properly positioned to effectively contribute to ending AIDS by 2030, there must also be a focus on human rights. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, for example, has stated, let me quote, "The full realization of human rights, of all human rights, and fundamental freedoms for all, is an essential element in the global response to the HIV epidemic, including in areas of prevention, treatment, care, and support. The importance of human rights-oriented approach was highlighted ahead of last year's UN high-level meeting, which saw the development of the political declaration on HIV and AIDS. And in a statement preceding the meeting, a group of independent experts warned, and I quote, "The AIDS epidemic is still driven by human rights violations around the world, including discrimination, violence, punitive laws, policies, and practices," unquote. However, even as we embrace the human rights approach and applaud the progress made in our region, we must nonetheless heed the admonitions given by several of our regional scholars, including Professor Rosemary Bellenbaum, that we must remain cognizant of the inadequacies of the legal structure in which we operate, and ought not to be lulled into a false sense of security about our constitutions, instead of thinking critically about them. Now, much progress has been made regionally and internationally by way of the development of jurisprudence in the quest of the realization of human rights in this area. And just to sample a few cases, in the 2000 decision of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, a man living with HIV sought an order that the state-owned South African Airways employ him as a cabin attendant after the airline had refused to hire him under a policy prohibiting the employment of persons living with HIV as cabin attendants. The Constitutional Court ruled that the airline had engaged in unfair discrimination, contrary to the right to equality guaranteed by the Constitution, and ordered the airline to employ the appellant. The court commented that each instance of discrimination represented a fresh instance of stigmatization, and that persons with HIV must not be condemned to economic death by the denial of equal opportunity in employment. Other courts around the world have played crucial roles in securing adequate, regular, and affordable universal treatment for HIV/AIDS. Our neighbors, Venezuela, in a 1999 judgment, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of almost 170 applicants living with HIV, who contended that the relevant ministry failed to supply prescribed antiretroviral drugs through the public health care system for persons not covered by the employment-linked National Social Security Scheme, and had not satisfied its constitutional obligations to them and other people living with HIV. Now, the court took a holistic approach to the problem, and not only did it order the supply of the medication, but it also ordered the ministry to seek the necessary budgetary allocation to comply with its legal obligations as ordered by the court. And another case in Venezuela, the court found in favor of persons living with HIV who had complained of a failure to supply prescribed antiretroviral medication regularly. And in making the order to compel the supply of the medication, the court observed that the right to health was not merely a state objective, but it was a fundamental social right, and that persons were entitled to the benefits of science and technology and to social security. There's a similar dispute in El Salvador, which engaged the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, where the complaints included failure to provide free antiretroviral drugs and allowing discriminatory treatment on account of HIV status. The Commission found that El Salvador had breached the petitioner's right to equal protection of law. And one element of that was the conduct of the authorities, forcing him to use a drinking glass labeled with a row of 3 X's to denote that it belonged to an HIV patient. And the court affirmed that the principle of non-discrimination must be strictly applied. As regards the availability of affordable treatment, a court in Thailand favor of two plaintiffs who sought access to a lower cost generic version of a particular antiretroviral medication. The specific order was for the multinational pharmaceutical company's patent to the relevant drug to be invalidated, at least in part, so as to permit the production and distribution of generic forms of the drugs in Thailand. But courts in the Caribbean have also been engaged in various ways, and I just mentioned that a recent example came from Belize, where although it was not directly related to AIDS, it's still related to stigma and discrimination, where the claimant, a homosexual man, successfully challenged the constitutionality of a section of the criminal code which criminalized anal sex between two consulting adult ladies in private. Ultimately, the court held that the impugned law breached the claimant's constitutional right to the recognition of human dignity, privacy, and equality before the law, and equal protection of the law without discrimination. And in Mississippi, in our original jurisdiction, we were called upon to determine whether Belize and Trinidad and Tobago had infringed the claimant's rights to free movement under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas and the 2007 decision of the Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM. The claimant, a Jamaican homosexual and noted LGBTI rights activists, contended that although he had never been denied entry into either country, their respective immigration acts classified homosexuals as prohibited immigrants or prohibited entry. But each country had maintained that the claimant was entitled to ask for free entry into its territory and to remain there for up to 6 months. And the court held that the state's policy permitting entry into CARICOM nationals who are homosexuals was not just a matter of discretion, but it was a legal requirement under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas and the domestic law. Now, yesterday afternoon, when I saw Professor Green, I confess that I got so interested in the topic that I was having difficulty in keeping my address down to the 20 minutes that was allocated. And he generously said to me, "Don't worry, you can have 25. So, this comes the time when I have to get my address. And I would like to start first by congratulating those who have been selected as champions. Your commitment to leveraging your individual and collective influence must play a key role in helping our region and the world end this epidemic. And I wish you all my sincere congratulations. Thank you. So, you are an example to the rest of us. We can no longer sit back contentedly in our rocking chairs of indecision or indecisiveness or intention or inertia and observe the undoing of all the advancements that we've made. While we celebrate your achievements, we all should join you, because this is the time for action. I leave you with the words of Dr. Poonam Ketprat Singh, the WHO Regional Director for Southeast Asia, which I think is equally relevant to us here today. Efforts over the next few years will decide whether we will end AIDS by 2030 or face resurgence. In over 4 decades of the epidemic, science, social mobilization, political commitment, and coordinated response among key stakeholders have made it possible to end AIDS. History shall not remind us if we become complacent now.
Thank you, Sir Dennis. Stigma, discrimination, ostracism, the real killers. So Dennis, we look forward to the implementation of the new judicial protocols, especially that. Law is a significant deterrent of health. Very interesting. And as we look at the program, we do know that Dr. Sato will continue this same theme, and we thought of the break, beyond the stigma and discrimination. That's the next topic. Why relaunching of the Champion for Change initiative is important to ending AIDS in the Caribbean. So there's going to be a natural segue into that discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. And although it's a bit late, I do want to acknowledge the presence of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana, Professor Iblor. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've now come to the end of what I hope has been an inspiring program. There's much food for thought, and to discuss your objectives over the next 2 days and plan the way forward. Thank you for your presence. God bless you, and please join us after for some refreshment and some warm Guyanese hospitality. We would like all the champions to come on stage. We're going to take it below as we do our group photo. Thank you very much, and we enjoy your
I wrote about them. Versus the video. Right again. I think you want to speak with survivors. Yeah. Try and get
I don't know why they think they could get a shot from so close. No, well, they're not the direct thing, they will not come back in. The first station, pronounce the accent. And because please come back a bit. Please come back a bit. There will be more space for all of us. Let's just make one circle. Perfect. Great. All right, ready? Excuse me, phone.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much.
I did a tentative entry, but and last year I did 1828. I did based on the period of time. Because last year I did contact with Western. You had to get that. I think I joined it with Sharon. But we did, remember when we had 3,000 euro raise last year? Yes. And I was going to come and chat with you. They did a great job as usual. Very good. Congratulations. Yeah. So Sharon is going to have the name of who she sent the letter to. So
I want.
So who are you representing?
Congrats. Good to have you.
So I was rushing to get down here. I was felt bad walking in my name. I was glad I got it back. How are you, boss? How are you? Yeah, you're rolling with the punches. We have no punches to lose.
Definitely.
One day at a time. That's the only way to take it. I have to speak to these two ladies. I have not seen them. Younger and we have some media. Okay. I saw them do good. Okay, bye-bye. Makes sense. Probably a better and yeah, get 2 bites of the cherry. Thank you very much. Thank you. I know I was hoping to I wanted you to come, but I had realized my time. And so my appointment is I'm not trying. Not the experience I have. But I haven't had to have one. So it just totally simple. And it was just when I was checking because they wanted me to I just let it pass. These are not times to rush it. Not with Mr. Trump. Oh, no. So I'm gonna run upstairs because I came in this morning. That's why I was late. I forgot my phone in my room, and you know I can't do without my phone. Like me.